Welcome to r/RedditRevenge. This is a story of someone getting back at someone with revenge after being wronged. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story. General manager constantly blamed and controlled me, but was soon fired for stealing money. The second story. Secretary of Society stole money from the society and finally got his A handed to him by my dad and other residents. The third story. Manager kept yelling at me and being unhygienic in the kitchen, so the owner fired him. The first story is, some people make it easy to ruin their life. Many years ago, I got a job running a small store in a national franchise. I'd worked for the company for about a year in lesser roles, but got promoted to general manager when an infamously non-profitable store lost yet another manager. In switching to this new store, I also changed regions, and was now working under a different regional manager than the one who had hired me. We'll call him Jay. Jay was terrible at his job. When I took over the store, he was supposed to help me do inventory to make sure nothing was missing, that I could be held accountable for. Instead, he had the exiting manager do it, which is exactly the last thing you want. I whipped the store into shape, fired one employee, promoted another to his place, and hired on someone to fill a role that had been empty for months. I sold off merchandise that had been sitting in the back room for years. The whole time, Jay would nag and micromanage me, even coming in and having my employees stop doing their jobs so they could change around my merchandise displays. I worked 6-day weeks, probably 75 to 80 hours salaried, but even so, Jay sometimes made me come in and open the store on Sundays, to essentially just sit in an empty store because everyone knew we were normally closed on Sundays. About 2 months into my new job, Jay took a few $100s in cash out of my store's till as petty cash. He said he would replace it with a receipt, as is standard with petty cash, but a month went by and I was still missing the money. The store's annual audit was the next month, but the auditor took Jay's word that he would get a receipt for the petty cash and let it slide. Then at the beginning of month 4, Jay tried to demote me. As part of my store, I had set up a whole section of one wall to display all the different laptops we carried, one of each. Each one was secured with a steel cable. Jay told me to put more laptops out. I told him I didn't have enough security cables, and anyway, we had one of each model, so it was unnecessary. When I went to lunch, Jay had my employees put out a dozen more laptops unsecured, and told me to keep it that way. A week later, a guy walked into the store, grabbed an unsecured laptop, and bolted out the door. Jay acted furious that I'd let someone steal a laptop. He said I was going to go back to my old job, but at a different store in his region. I politely pointed out that the previous month, my third at the store, was the first time in 3 years that the store had actually turned a profit. Jay backed down. He still hadn't replaced the petty cash. Nothing happened for a while because Jay was in the hospital. He would occasionally call, and his voice was raspy and hoarse, and we all figured he had the flu. Month 5 rolls around. Jay is back at work and micromanaging me as usual. After a very late night, I leave, leaving my assistant manager to close up, as I'd done many times before. Said AM was in line for his own store as soon as a position opened up, and had been with the company several years longer than me, so he knew his business. Unfortunately, he forgot to set the security bar on the loading dock doors, and even more unfortunately, that happened to be the night someone tried to break in. They hooked a chain to the doors and used a truck to rip them open and steal a couple $1,000s worth of TVs. I don't know if the security bar would have stopped them, but of course Jay decided it was all my fault. Jay went on a tear about how I'd failed to secure the store. Then on top of the stolen laptop, which remember was Jay's fault, that was too much, and this time I was being demoted for sure. I was sick of his crap and quit. A couple days later, I contacted the national office and informed them of the missing money from what used to be my store. I figured Jay would get investigated and have to come up with the money and that'd be it, but it was the only way I could think to get back at him. A few weeks later, my original regional manager called me up and offered me my job back, saying he had taken over Jay's region because Jay had been let go. I declined, as I'd found a job that paid almost as much, and I only had to work 40 hours a week. This did prompt me to go visit my old store, though. When I got to the store, I found all my same people still there, and my AM was now GM. He told me the whole story. A few days after I'd left, someone from home office called the store and started asking the AM questions about Jay. Jay was sitting right in the next room, so the AM found it very harrowing, but he told the guy what had happened with the laptop, the break-in, and the missing money. Apparently, the home office guy investigated all of Jay's stores and found a bunch of other shady things that happened at other ones too. I was just the only manager who had tried to hold Jay accountable. Jay was fired, of course. A few months later, I stopped by another of the stores in the area, run by a guy I'd worked with before I'd worked under Jay. The guy told me that Jay had gotten hired on by one of our competitors, stolen several $1,000s, and fled the state. I also learned that the reason Jay had worked in the area in the first place was because his family was there, so they'd split off a chunk of the region I'd been hired into, just so Jay could work in the area and be near his family. Now he has a warrant on him for grant theft if he ever returns. The next story is, misuse your political powers for corruption, enjoy your ruined life. This is a long and political one, so brace yourselves. This happened when I was like 12 years old, 17 right now, and this all technically happened with my dad, so I don't play any role in this. Cast, CS, corrupt secretary, the villain. BD, bad A dad, the hero. R, other residents. BW, bachelorette. This story began when we moved into the new society when I was 12. All was good for me. New school, house being renovated, new friends. Before we moved to the new society, we needed the approval of the society committee, which was only the CS, his secretary, and few other residents. There was no chairman. We introduced ourselves and were approved. Turned out CS would be our neighbor, so he asked us whether we needed someone to renovate our flat. My father, not suspecting anything, pitying him and thinking as he's the neighbor, let's get it done by CS. My dad thought that CS was into real estate and renovating businesses or something. He was dead wrong. Everything was fine-ish. The workers were renovating. Workers were unprofessional AF. Didn't know what they were doing. Almost applied the wrong color to the wall with texture, until we stopped that dumb A. 10% of the wall must still be visible with a darker shade than the rest of the wall. Even after trying to get it fixed, it still triggers my dad, even though we don't live there anymore. The real problem began after the work was complete when CS asked 10,000 rupees more than the agreed amount for the extra paint they had to purchase, to compensate for 10% of the paint tub they used. The entire tub must have been about 2,000 rupees, to fix the F-up they did. It was not a small amount. This sparked a dispute between my father and CS. At the end, my father paid that idiot XXX rupees, not disclosing the details to make it obvious if the person is reading, for safety and legal reasons, to make him STFU and leave. Everything was fine for like 6 months, until another massive dispute rose, when CS and his wife beat BW over a personal dispute they had. Won't disclose. Everyone, R, was triggered by what CS did, and finally decided to take some action against him. Turns out he wasn't even a real estate guy. His main source of income was the society. He stole money from the society's monthly maintenance bill, which every R paid, and he was living lavishly for a very, very, very long time. But no one was willing to go against him because he was a political party member, whose party was in power in India that time. A politician can F your life up here in India. But everyone had had enough of his BS, eating, sleeping, SHing on our money. How the F dare he? It fills me with rage now that I more or less understand how the world works. So everyone, led by BD, he was a politician too in his college days, but quit for a better life. Plus, my grandmother told him to quit. BD has an excellent grasp on English and wrote all the documents for his party, but thankfully he never was corrupt. Don't worry, he's a very good person. Filled an FIR against CS for assault and corruption and tax evasion, IG. They also informed the MP of my state about him and got him kicked from the party. CS's spy in the party gave info to him that someone named my BD came to their office to file a complaint to the police and get him fired from the party. It was a very tense time in my society at that time. Parents prohibited their kids from going down to play for their safety, especially my parents. I frowned at that time and whine as well, but now I understand. My parents accompanied me at all times when I absolutely had to go down, school bus, etc. Even the teachers at school were instructed by my parents to keep an eye on me. At the end, CS was removed from the political post, and also from the secretary position, and BD was made the chairman. He was jobless, not like he had a job anyway, and was having a hard time living. He had a lot of kids. We moved from the society in the following 4 to 5 months, because BD feared for me and my mom's safety. CS was home all the time and my dad was not, and we were neighbors. My dad asks the R sometimes as to see what CS is up to. They say that he keeps to himself at his house, but he somehow purchased a new car. He's a shady MF. The last story is, wanna be an a-hole to me? Okay, enjoy unemployment. So, some backstory. This was about 3 or so years ago, I think. I started working at this chain restaurant near my town when I was about 16, and it was my first real job, so I was understandably pretty excited. At first, I got along with everyone and made some pretty quick friends. This new environment actually helped me gain some confidence and be myself, so I got a lot sassier. Alright, so one day this guy comes in. We'll call him A. He was probably in his late 20s, maybe early 30s. I don't know, and I didn't really care to ask. I'd been working at this place for a year before A, and I stopped getting along. He had this almost entitled attitude. By this I just meant that he walked around like he owned the place, didn't like to be nice to people or guests, and also disobeyed the company's hygiene rules. I guess it was because he'd been there for so long and thought he ran the place. I learned quickly that A had a nasty temper. One second he's nice and helpful, and the next he's cussing you out. He's even thrown a spoon and loads of food at me through the window in the kitchen. So I might have gotten sassy with him at one point, and anyone that knew me there knew it was all fun and games, and I wasn't a mean person. But for some reason, A started to hate me. When I say hate, I mean hate. The man swore constantly at me, made fun of me, and continued to throw bits of potatoes or pickles or whatever was laying around at me. I reported him to my boss numerous times and nothing happened. They were buddies, so he wasn't going to do anything about A. This is when I started to hatch my plan. I had noticed that the company owner came in a couple of times a month and inspected things, hung around and worked for a bit and consulted with my boss. So I kept track of when he came and how long he stayed, and eventually I knew when he'd come in and I would be working. This took me a couple of months, and so in this time I also noted every time A cussed, threw things, and violated the health rules. I took pictures of him every time he handled the food without his gloves on, and then when he's eat, with his bare hands and lick them, and then touch the food again. So nasty. Of course, I wasn't able to get all the times he'd done this, as I also had to work, but by the time I'd learned the owner's schedule, I had nearly 100 pictures, and had printed all of them out full color. The next time the owner came in, I asked to speak with him privately, and we went into the back office. I told him everything, from the cussing to the throwing and unsanitary behavior. I even told him I'd complained to my boss and he'd done nothing. Man, he was peeved. See, the way our kitchen was set up was sort of an open concept, and so the customers could hear every time he swore, threw something, or even when he was unsanitary. I learned someone else had complained a while back, a customer who had heard him swearing like a trucker, and gone to see and saw him put his fingers in his mouth. After this, they gave him a warning and basically had a close eye on him, waiting for him to screw up again so they could fire him. Apparently though, he put on a nice show for the owner whenever he came, and my boss had not been reporting A whenever he did these things. They thought he had turned around. The owner thanked me and took the pictures and the notes of harassment I'd taken and told me he'd deal with it. When I went in the next day, I was so glad to get to see his reaction. He came storming in screaming at the top of his lungs, calling everyone nasty names and stomping his feet like a child. His girlfriend, the sweetest girl, who he verbally harassed sometimes, was holding him back and yelling at my boss for firing him. It was the best moment of my life, watching this guy's life crumble all because he couldn't be a decent person. Working there was really pleasant after he left. It's a shame I had to leave for college pretty soon after this, so I couldn't enjoy the peace for a little while longer. I learned later that he'd came back begging for his job. Apparently getting him fired had caused his girlfriend to quit, and so they had no income for a while, but his girl was able to find a new job somewhere else. Guess he wasn't as lucky. No one wanted to hire this jack A. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications.